Welcome to this episode of the Structural Engineering Channel podcast, a podcast focused on helping structural engineering professionals stay up to date on technical trends in the field and to help them succeed in their careers and lives.
In this episode, we are talking to Mike Howell, PESE, who is the president and owner of Aero Engineering. Mike is a licensed structural engineer who has experience as both a contractor and a designer. He specializes in providing engineering services for design build projects and has experience in several different types of projects.
I'm your co-host, Matt McCardle.
And I'm your co-host, Kara Green. Now let's jump into our conversation of the week with Michael Howell. Mike, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us on the Structural Engineering podcast. Now, we've done a brief introduction on you, but can you tell us in your words, as the president and CEO of Aero Engineering, what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Well, thanks for having me on. This is really quite an honor. Aero Engineering is a structural engineering company in Morgantown, West Virginia. We do projects that range from residential all the way up to heavy industrial. My days typically consist of usually a mixture of doing design work or running some calculations or doing some of our drafting to scoping out new projects, dealing with proposals. And then ultimately, probably the majority of my time is spent kind of managing the projects that our other engineers are working on and just making sure that they have what they need to get those projects done.
Thanks, Mike. I know you've been in a lot of businesses and worked for a lot of firms. When and why did you decide to go into business? And, basically that was my question. When and why, and how did that go into your career path in terms of working for other companies?
Yeah, I mean, I have worked for several firms. And I will say, I've worked for some great firms through my career. I kind of look back now and realize, some of the great mentors that I had and some of the engineers I got to work under and some of the projects that I got to do at those companies. And, I've really had kind of a blessed career where I've gotten to do a lot of different things. But, even so, it was probably early in my career. I guess I started noticing that I wasn't fitting well into other people's systems. I mean, I got along, I worked great. I had good companies, but I just didn't like doing things for the sake of doing things. And it's like in all these different companies, they were they would be doing things that they had done for years that didn't make sense or that I saw could be done better, but they were kind of ingrained into the corporate culture. And it just one of those things that always kind of, I guess, I noticed that I didn't really agree with. And then probably about 5 years ago, I went on and got an MBA, and I really started thinking about the business of what we do as engineers. And I found a real passion for running business and for business in general. And then it just kind of became a slow evolution of eventually I found an opportunity in 2019. That was the chance I had to go full time and start Aero as my full-time company. So.
You mentioned the MBA. Was that something, do you think, for people wanting to start their own business, is that something that you found helpful, or was it supplemental, or do you think just being in the industry for so long is enough?
I get asked that question a lot. And I will say for me, after I got my PE, it was probably a year or two after I got my PE that I really started thinking about, the MBA too. And it was a great progression for me kind of after you got that technical side to start thinking about the business and start thinking about a business degree. And to be quite honest, I absolutely loved my MBA program. Now, I wish I could go back now and kind of take an engineering degree again, because I think in some ways education is lost on the young, because you don't realize what a great opportunity it is just to learn and to have these resources that you can learn from. And so I was, getting my MBA as an older individual. I was in my early 30s at that point. And I think that made a big difference because I had some life experience and I was able to apply it, into the real everyday of what I was doing as an engineer. And that really made it a lot more useful, I think, for me. But yeah, no, I think education is great. You get what you put into it. And I really, I just fell in love with doing the business school. I was doing the extra readings, I was doing the extra assignments, and all the stuff I probably didn't do as an undergrad, but it was a really beneficial degree for me, kind of to make this decision later on.
That's great advice to our listeners. I have a lot of friends who are either in the process of getting their MBA or have just gotten it
Yeah.
or are planning on getting it on
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
side. And it's interesting to think about, especially because, a lot of disciplines, outside of engineering really benefit from the engineering background. And
Yes.
all of the things that we learn in engineering school in our education or through practice, you know, it just expounds upon our success in other, in business. Or let's say, or I have a friend, he was a civil engineer and now he's in medical school.
Yeah.
It just, it's really interesting how you can facilitate a career um, with a basis in engineering, and then you can really kind of capitalize on that in any which manner you wish to.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so you mentioned, after you got your business degree, that's really when you started looking at starting a business. And it sounds as though you had some things that you thought would be more successful in practice than maybe what other firms had done in the past that you had worked for. Can you kind of tell us what the most important attributes to you are for a successful engineering business?
Yeah. And that's a great question. I guess it really comes down to your definition of success. Aero Engineering is a 2-year-old firm. I still wake up every day with the same kind of roller coaster of emotions of like, hey, we're doing great, and oh great, what's going to happen tomorrow? And I think we're still finding what our place is in the market and kind of what our company is going to be. And so, for us, success looks different than the company that's been around for 50 years. But I guess the best way to maybe answer this would be to um, explain kind of what Aero does that I think does make us successful and what has led to our success over the first 2 years that we've been in business. Aero is built on 3 ideas: be an expert, be passionate, and be a servant. And being an expert is we strive for our engineers to be well educated, to be licensed, to continually engage in that concept of lifelong learning, where they're not just understanding what the book says, but they're understanding how to step outside of it and see the problem from a different perspective. And that has helped tremendously kind of establish Aero very early on in our tenure as someone that people can come to get a real answer and to get a good decision. The other thing is just a passion. I mean, I think if you're going to be successful in anything, you have to be passionate about it. I was trying to share with our team just not too long ago, just the joy that it is to do what we do. When you stop and you think about what the projects that we're involved with and the clients that we get to interact with, you realize that every single thing that we're doing is someone else's dream, and we get to be part of that, in some small way. And when you can really see your job in that perspective, it's truly humbling to do that. And also, it should really inspire you to keep doing more and to keep working hard. And the last thing is, being a servant. I think in the structural engineering field and the civil engineering field, in a larger sense, we became engineers to serve. I know in my own track record, in my own history, one of the reasons I chose civil was because I enjoyed serving society and I wanted to make a difference in this world. And I think as a company, if you don't embody the servant attitude, then you're not going to be very successful. And so we always try to humble ourselves and to become a servant for our clients. And so I don't know what makes other companies successful or not. I mean, the companies I've worked with were successful for probably other reasons, but I think for what Aero is and for what I try to instill, it's just that idea of being an expert, being passionate, and then ultimately serving. So
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. definitely agree on that one, and especially with the purpose and the mission and why you uh, the impact that civil engineers, structural engineers have on the basically the environment. That's what I always tell engineers is it's really easy to get stuck in the weeds maybe once you've been in the job for a couple years, and then you kind of lose track of why you're even doing stuff. But when you look at the bigger picture and you look again, always like reassessing like who you're helping, how you're making an
Yeah.
impact, it really does help keep that North Star,
Yeah.
still in place and keeps you going, and really, I think, ignites that passion again, or sustains it, because it's really easy to just get stuck in the weeds and forget why you're doing stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I think with the you mentioned how other firms do it. I think maybe we can all agree it's businesses are made up of people, and the people that you're serving and that are on your team definitely makes an impact on how successful your business is. So, being so busy, how do you remain people focused, and how do you prioritize the needs of your employees?
I guess it kind of goes back to what when I started Aero, I had some very distinct thoughts about what an engineering company should be. And one of the things I had realized after my MBA, we had touched on it a little bit earlier, is engineers are so well equipped to be independent and to be professionals. And that's really, if you look at our career track, that's what we're striving to be, is sort of an expert in our own fields and within our businesses. And so if you're going to have a company that employs other engineers that are already of such a high caliber and are already so well equipped to do what they need to do, then really the purpose of the company is to allow those engineers to be the best that they can be. And I know when I've hired engineers so far in Aero, and the ones that we have working for us now, I was very conscious about what their own goals were, and I wanted to understand where do they want their careers to be, and what type of projects do they want to get involved with, and what is their philosophy and why they chose to do this profession. And the ones that have been the most successful and are part of our team now, they're the answers to those questions fall right in line with what I want Aero to be. And so um I don't know, if there's a magic answer for how you do it. I just daily something that I try to be conscious of. Every project that we work on or undertake, I try to be cognizant of what their needs are, of what their fears are, of what they're struggling with, also what they feel successful about and what makes them motivated to do what we do. And then as long as I can help with that, I want to give them those type of projects and those experiences that they find the most rewarding to be part of. But it's not something that there's a magic answer for. And for every one time I've probably done good with it, I've probably done it bad twice. So it's just something I'm very conscious of, and something that means a lot to what our company is going to be. So
No, and that's great. You know, it's great to hear a president that speaks about boosting his personnel. I think that's really important, especially I think sometimes if you don't cater to your employees, um, that's a great way to fail a business.
sure.
They're the ones who, you mentioned like helping others achieve their dreams. I mean, because they do that work for you as
Right.
well as their CEO and president. But it's kind of a twofold system. You both boost each other up.
Exactly.
But you mentioned, of course, that you started your business, give or take, about 2 years ago.
Hmm.
And there are many reasons why a lot of engineers choose to start their own firm. And you've mentioned a few reasons for yourself. But I can assume, since I don't have my own firm, that starting an engineering firm is not an easy endeavor, especially given current situation. So I'm very excited to hear what you have to say. What are some of the most rewarding as well as the least rewarding aspects of starting your own engineering company? What were some of the benefits and the challenges that you have faced over the past couple of years?
Yeah, I'm asked this question a lot. I think it's what's on the mind of everybody who has ever thought about this. And I laugh when I'm asked this because there was a point where I was in the planning process for doing this, maybe the year or two before I actually did it, where I was really daydreaming what this was going to be like. And I sort of had the I laugh now because it's just so funny to me. I had this vision that I would wake up and get to the gym and maybe work for a few hours, and I would have all this freedom and flexibility. And I was so excited for that. The head of the company and the flexibility, the freedom, the free time. I thought, and all of it was a lie. I mean, I found out now. I mean, yeah, none of that has actually happened. I work twice as hard as I ever did. I work longer hours. I work more often. I'm constantly juggling around my kids and my family and and whatnot. So I laugh because that's what I always thought was going to be the most rewarding part of this. And I've learned something in 2 years, and I'm 100% sincere when I say this, that the best part of having your own company is having employees. And we just talked about, trying to make them successful. And I have just discovered that having a team around you and having this crew that you can kind of see and watch develop and get excited for them to grow is so rewarding. I gave Christmas bonuses last year, and that stands out to me as like the best day since I've started Aero. No, they weren't big. I mean, it was the end of 2020 and COVID and everything, but just simply to be able to do that, I realized, wow, this is the coolest part by far. Then the other side of the question is, what's the least rewarding? I don't like that question as much because even the hardest days, the late nights, the long hours, the weekends of work have been rewarding in their own way. I mean, it's just a different feeling, I guess, when you're kind of working for yourself. It's not, or at least it shouldn't feel like hard work. Even though it is, it's very challenging to do it. But probably the part that has been the most difficult is maybe a better way to phrase it. There's no playbook for doing this. There's no rule book. There's no right way or wrong way to do this. And it can be a very lonely decision. And to just be, to open up the curtains and kind of share the inner, feelings, it's a challenge to deal with, the independence. It's what everybody wants, but when you're faced with the reality of it and you realize that it's just you making these decisions, it can be a real challenge. And all the insecurities and self-doubt that we all deal with will come full force whenever you're responsible to yourself for your lifestyle now and for your income and everything like that. You will face every demon inside of you. And I think that is probably the hardest part to in the last 2 years is facing loneliness with it. And but then you get those other days too. And it has been single-handedly the best thing I've done, and simultaneously the hardest thing I've done is maybe the best way to put it.
Yeah, that's
Thank you for that insight. And
yeah, go ahead.
sorry, you first, Matt.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that was yeah, great. Yeah, I guess a great perspective because I do think maybe on the internet nowadays, like entrepreneurship is kind of idolized, like being a movie star or something.
Yeah.
But then when you actually talk to the people that actually do it, it's tough. Just from what you said, it's people see all of the successes, but they see none of the failures because all the failures have like failed and you don't see them. But when you like look at all these successful companies, like, oh, that looks cool. But I mean, you look at the statistics, there's like a 90-95% failure rate of new businesses. And yeah, you only do see the successes. And going into business by yourself, I can imagine it is uh, if you're an employee, you can expect a check. You may have a good week, you may have a bad week. You're still going to get paid. But if you're on your own, if you don't, if it's all on you,
Yeah.
especially when you're
Yeah.
starting up, like you're making the decisions. If you don't do something, you're not going to get paid. it's it's
It's very true.
it's sometimes I would imagine more daunting than just being an employee, and what you also said about it's tough, but I think the major thing that uh, you've said is it's tough work, but as long as it's rewarding and fulfilling, I think
Hmm.
that's the main thing, because any job is not going to be fun 100% of the time, but at the end of the day, is it fulfilling? Is that something that you find rewarding and that you, at the end of the day, you can get fulfilled by it? So great
Yeah.
points.
Yeah, and I was just going to mirror exactly what Matt said. I have some baby cousins who are around 16 and 18, and all they see on Instagram are these entrepreneur videos where it's like Maseratis, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't think it's actually like that. So I'm sure our listeners can appreciate, the very honest reality check is that it is hard work. And as engineers, we appreciate hard work. All of us work hard, but it's nice to get your perspective on, what exactly your hard work looks like. And we appreciate you being honest about that. And exactly, the internet has romanticized entrepreneurship.
Well, and let me add to that. I mean, when I was 5 years ago and I was finishing the MBA, all I wanted to be was an entrepreneur. I was so in love with the word entrepreneur, right? And I had that image of like, sitting in the coffee shop and working from a laptop and like just that ultimate freedom. But the reality is like now I can't stand when people call me an entrepreneur. Like it just because it's such a fake word, and I guess the way I was talking to a group not too long ago in an entrepreneurship program, and I said, look, you can strive to call yourself an entrepreneur, and that's great. I mean, for $25, you can start a business with the state, Secretary of State, and you're an entrepreneur. Great. But if you want to be successful, you have to embody the characteristics of entrepreneurship, which is a whole different thing than just simply slapping the title entrepreneur on yourself. And a lot of it is like what you guys said. The internet has completely clouded what that looks like.
So, what would be your new word?
I don't know. Making the decision to work twice as hard as you ever needed to when you had a job, I guess.
Mike, kind of just like going, since we're going into like and kind of like these syllables and or descriptions, do you see a difference between a self-employed engineer versus an engineer that's actually opening up their own firm? Is there a
Yeah.
difference between that?
I do think there is. I mean, yeah, we've alluded to a few times now. Engineers are so well equipped already to do this, and really, a business degree on top of an engineering degree is a good thing. But you're already equipped with the hardest parts of a business degree, which is the critical thinking and the logic and stuff like that. And I think that's probably undersold, just how well equipped engineers are coming out with just even an undergrad degree in engineering to be successful business leaders. And and I think the decision to go off on your own and to become self-employed is a commendable one. I think it's a difficult decision. I mean, just on the reality side that you're no longer getting that consistent paycheck is a challenge that is worthy of some notoriety to go ahead and do that. But I will say in 2 years of now operating Aero, there is a vast difference between going off on my own and becoming self-employed and trying to grow a business. I look back now, and although I reckon how difficult it was to make that decision, it was a relatively simple one to execute. All you had to do was worry about yourself, and you can buy the software, you can buy the insurance, you can buy the programs you need and the books and everything. You can sit down at your desk and you can do engineering, and it's you're already equipped with the skill set you need to do that. But now, having decided probably about a year in that I wanted to become more than just Mike Howell Engineering, that I really saw a vision for what Aero needed to be in this industry and in this market, that a whole new set of challenges came on. Logistically, payroll, taxes, the forms, there was a lot of surprises that I had just never even considered that companies have to think about and put in. There's the um, hiring. How do you find good people, and how do you share your vision with them and let them share their vision with you and figure out a way to work together towards it. I mean, there's just an endless amount of decisions and problems and challenges that have come with the decision to try and grow a business versus just being self-employed. Um, the challenges are harder, but the rewards are a lot better. Like we talked about, having employees is great. Be able to take on bigger projects. And that was really the decision that I was faced with, is there was an opportunity to either stay self-employed and stay single, but I was going to be limited in the scope and the depth of the projects that I could take on. But I wanted more, and I wanted to take on some bigger challenges, and I saw an opportunity to take on some of those, and that was the decision that was made, kind of around me, that let's try to grow a business, not just make it all about me.
No, that's great to hear. And that's also a great perspective to offer, because I think a lot of engineers, especially recently, went self-employed, as opposed to just going back in the office. And Lord knows Forbes has put out so many studies about the great, what do they call it? The great, where no one's going into the office anymore, or just
Yep.
deciding to quit.
Yeah.
Which leads to an interesting question that I have for you, which is, obviously we're coming off the tail end of COVID pandemic. Things are kind of opening up. Some places closing. I'm in Texas right now, closing in other
Yeah.
places. What effects did the pandemic have on you going from a single self-employed engineer to growing an actual, a
Yeah.
firm?
No, and I mean, I don't think in my wildest dreams I could have planned for a worldwide pandemic 6 months after I started my company. And there was a day, I mean, I can remember it like it was yesterday, in early March of 2020. I hit send on an email, and I sat down, and there was nothing left to do. I had no projects that were coming around. I can just remember thinking, like, this is the moment that every person who chooses to go off on their own fears, is I have nothing on my little board, and I don't know what to do. And in that kind of the darkest moment there, I really did touch on something that was kind of profound, at least for me, and it helped get me through. And now I think it's led to a lot of success since then. And that's just kind of like a movie scene. Like I just got up, I went back to my desk, and I started rewriting our specs. It was just, and then the phone started calling a few days later. And so I think COVID-19 will forever shape what Aero will become in the future. And I think part of that is, we will always stay kind of a remote company. I mean, we've got 3 full-time engineers. One of them lives 2 states away. And so, we're already kind of adopting that remote business model. And I think as we grow, that's what we're going to do. And as I look forward even now to some growth strategies, another thing that came out of the COVID-19 pandemic was diversifying. Very few other firms in the area that we're in take on residential work, but all of a sudden people were at home and sitting around their houses. And so we survived COVID by, crawling in people's basements and designing their additions and stuff like that. Now we're still doing a lot of that work, but we've significantly changed into some bigger projects and things like that. But that's one of those things that I think we will always adopt, that because those are such rewarding projects for their own reasons. And then, like I said, we're going to stay remote, and we're going to always be striving to grow that way. And, if I look at some future strategies that I'd like to employ, it's actually centered around a completely remote business model, where we have engineers operating out of perhaps completely different cities, and we're trying to build a network of people who adopt that same idea and are willing to embrace that. And so I think it gave us a real opportunity. At first, I didn't believe that. I didn't believe that through a lot of 2020, but where we don't have the business model of 30 years ago to contend with and to change, we are going to form a structural engineering company based on 2021 realities. And that, I think, gives us an enormous opportunity that, if there's ever something positive in the business world out of what we come through, it's a huge opportunity for us to do that. So.
And that's actually great. I'm excited to hear of an engineering firm going completely virtual. I think with 2020, I think one of the benefits that we have seen is, the infrastructure of virtual work has, grown significantly, making everyone, the possibility of being virtual. And there's a couple of firms that I worked with, and I keep getting notifications on LinkedIn of like their CEO looking at how to move an engineering firm that used to have an office space to virtual or flexible work. So it's great to hear that from you. It's a very forward thinking type of mentality, and I think that's great. I think it's great that you're going to approach it that way.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on the types of people, because I think maybe the industry before, people thought, oh, it's too tough or it's too overwhelming, it's too strict. But then I think when COVID opened up, maybe I'm thinking positive here, like opportunities where there is remote work and it's more flexible, that it can give people that that don't have that flexibility, maybe with families or or whatnot, whatever's going on in their lives. It gives them opportunities to be like, oh, I can do this job because it's flexible and that's what I need in my life right now, but I still want to do engineering. So I think it opens up different opportunities for different types of people. For if you want to stay in the
Absolutely.
office, go to a firm that works at the office. If not, you have options now. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Mike, to end off here, what piece of advice would you give to our listeners out there that are maybe thinking of starting their own engineering company, especially in the tough times that we're living in now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think when you encompass all the things that we've talked about and probably every business book that's out there, the one unifying thing that I think has kind of got me through or given me, the opportunity to do this is vision. And you have to understand what your own vision is before you do this. I mean, in any career, I mean, you should never be taking a job with a company that you don't have a vision for where you want to go in that company. If and maybe that's a generational thing, but I just don't believe you should be working hard every day and not, trying to get to doing something different. But if you are going to choose to become self-employed or to grow a business and I think too, it's important to distinguish that it's not always about starting a brand new company. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities to grow, maybe within your own company or in your own department. And, this is the time to be innovative and to bring on new ideas for businesses, because everyone's sort of facing some very unique challenges in this post-9 or COVID-19 world. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to start your own company and give up your paycheck to be, forgive the expression, an entrepreneur. You can bring that into, your own companies and to do some different things. But when you get past all of it, you have to have a vision for what you want it to be. And I know that when I get most excited, it's when I start thinking about what Aero is going to become, not what it is right now. And that to me gets me really, really excited to think about, where our engineers are going to be in 5 years and what Aero could be doing in 5 years. And, um, I that so if you are going to do this, take some time to understand what your vision really is. And from that point, let that lead everything else, because everyone's got an opinion about how business should work and no one's right. What works for an engineering company is not what works for most other companies and vice versa. And to sift through all that, to sift through all the information, it really comes down to vision and about seeing what you want it to be.
So what's the 2026 vision for Aero?
To be quite honest, I want to be in multiple states and multiple cities. And I want, when people think of who do they have to call to do structural engineering, I don't even want there to be a second guess. I want it to be Aero's name.
Thanks so much, Micah, for being our guest and giving us an inside look of what it is to start your own business and all that entails, especially during these these crazy times, maybe post crazy times now, but we'll see about that. So thanks a lot, and we enjoyed having you.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. And I know our engineers listening really have will take your very transparent view and adopt it and see whether or not they're going to be part of the great leave that Forbes keeps talking about.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Perfect. Thank you so much again.
All right. Thanks, guys.
I hope you enjoyed the episode today. We would love to hear your feedback, comments, or any questions you may have. To leave them, please visit structuralengineeringchannel.com. There you will find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, which is episode number 59, as well as any links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time, we wish you the best in all of your structural engineering endeavors.